Stride Fates is a sequel of sorts to the VR parkour game Stride. Stride always wanted to be a VR version of Mirror's Edge. The similarities are all too obvious, and while the studio Joyway did a good job borrowing not only the core gameplay idea but also things like setting and aesthetic, what Stride is missing is the basic story to guide players through the game. After some time in early access, the game had its full release on the Quest platform in 2021 and on Steam in June last year, still without the, by the community, highly anticipated story mode. Instead, it was announced to come as a free update to the game later that year. In December, Joyway informed their community of a change of plans. There would no longer be a story mode for Stride. Instead, the team has shifted focus to a way more ambitious project. Instead of delivering a 1 hour or so long story update, they wanted to create a full-length campaign that they would not be able to include into the main game for technical reasons. And now, nearly a year later, Stride Fates is here. Is this finally a full-fledged VR Mirror's Edge? Is this deserving of its own game, or should it have been a DLC, or better yet part of Stride to begin with? Let's find out. Before we get into the details, I want to make one thing very clear. The game has a lot of problems, from some jankiness that should be easy to fix, all the way up to core gameplay concepts that just don't work very well. Some parts of Stride Fates are downright terrible. I have a much longer list of things I did not like about the game than of things I did like. Still, I had fun playing it. On some level it did click with me and I did have a good time. And at the end of the day, that's what's important, right? You are part of the Sky Chase Police, a force dedicated to keeping the rooftops of the neo-districts of Iron City crime-free, equipped with special gadgets and implants to allow for fast traversal in those lofty heights. During your training mission you happen upon bandits and somehow you get pulled into a squabble with them. Assisted by your operator Liz, you engage in an adrenaline-fueled chase after the bandits' leader, the elusive Infinite, who came into power only recently, his identity a mystery. Simultaneously you start looking for your long lost brother, who vanished without a trace some years ago. At the end there's a shocking revelation that nobody could have seen coming. That was sarcasm in case you didn't notice. So Stride Fate's story is not good. That it is very tropey and predictable is by no means the worst part about it. The worst part is that the writing and the world building is very erratic. In chapter 2 a new character gets introduced, a former crime boss who fell from power by Infinite's sudden rise, and for that reason you have a common enemy, so you stand on different sides of the law. For the rest of the game, the character gets completely ignored, as if he never happened. Later you meet this hacker kid, who's actually quite funny, but he abruptly changes allegiances without the game giving any reason or explanation for his sudden change in behavior. There's some dialogue about the bandits, how they grew up in the slums and don't have any prospect in life and thus often have no other choice than joining the gangs. Later in the game they are all suddenly clones, and you shouldn't feel too bad about shooting them in the head until they are all no longer alive. I could give you a lot more examples. The whole story and world is a mess. It's completely inconsistent. I've seen a debate about whether the story and voice acting in this game might be AI generated, and honestly I find that to be pretty insulting towards AI technology. Just because something is bad does not necessarily mean it's AI generated. Humans are very much capable of producing terrible stuff too, thank you very much. But I have to admit there were moments that gave me pause. At one time the main character addresses one of the crime bosses by his own name, so he confuses his own name with the crime boss's name. You would assume that if humans were involved in writing a script and recording the voice lines, someone would have catched that, but I don't know, maybe not. The point to take away here is, don't buy the game for the story, don't expect anything in that department. It's very clear that Joyway did not care about that aspect of the game. At the end of the day, how it was written might not be that important. Voice acting was actually not altogether that bad, as long as the characters did not try to show emotion, and particularly the main character is just an emotionless bastard, so that worked. Sometimes it's pretty painful though. Stride Fates is mainly a parkour game with some shooter elements and a bit of stealth mixed in. You move with your left thumbstick as a standard, but you run by swinging your arms while moving. I actually like that, it makes the game feel active. There's a button to jump, but you jump higher when you swing your arms up. You can slide by crouching while running, either with a crouch button or by physically crouching. You can wall run, use zip lines and hook shots, and there's a bullet time mode. You can swing over a gap between buildings, crash into the windows, shoot the bad guys in slow motion like an absolute badass. Fuck yeah! When everything comes together, it doesn't always work out like that, but sometimes it does, and when it does, it feels amazing. Dashing above the rooftops of the dystopian city is by far the best part of the game. The controls work flawlessly, this is where it shines. In these moments you will be altogether willing to forget and forgive the lesser enjoyable parts of the game. At least I was. There's a lot of climbing that works good for the most part, but there's a bit of jank here. Sometimes your character grabs a railing from the wrong direction, sometimes you get propelled backwards while trying to vault up a ledge. It's annoying when it happens, but it's not a huge deal, and I'm pretty sure that Joyway will iron out these kinks over time. Climbing slows the game down a bit, but it's okay, it's weightless and still pretty fast for motion controlled VR climbing. The game lets you run towards a ledge with gun in hand, jump and vault up with just one hand, and these moments is just great. It's fast, it's cool, I love it. There are no comfort options at all. I did not have problems with motion sickness and I'm not immune to it, but if you are usually dependent on using comfort options to be able to play, this might be one to skip, at least for now. Aside from being a parkour game, Stride Fates is also a shooter. A very basic shooter. There are 3 guns in the game, a pistol, an SMG and a shotgun. Well, technically there are 4, the sniper enemies drop for some unexplainable reason an assault rifle that you can pick up and use until it runs out of ammo. Enemy variety is very low, 99% of the enemies are the same bandit grunts. Very rarely there are the sniper enemies that also have a shield, and then there's a mini boss with a mini gun. That's it. At some point you come into another gang's territory, but those enemies are just reskins of your basic runs. The game is very self-aware about its shortcomings. At one point you interrupt this meeting of different gang bosses and you have a dialogue with your operator about how strange it is that you only encounter this one bandit faction.
It's strange. Why have I only met bandits? Where are the other factions?
Alarm, guys!
I don't know. It's really weird.
Very strange indeed. At that point I might as well have gone full force wall breaking by saying something like the game's budget was not high enough for another faction, but they did not do that. Shooting feels okay, it's serviceable, weapon angle is a bit off, but they will add an option to adjust that in a future update. The guns are all a bit wispy, they lack punch and recoil. You can only one-hand them, but you can dual wield. You reload by angling the gun down. I'm usually an advocate for involved reload mechanics, but in this case I actually did not mind the simple reload. It fits into the fast non-stop nature of the gameplay. There are so many things that slow the game down, too many, way too many in fact, that I would not want to have another one, and a manual reload would definitely slow the game down. Speaking of pacing mechanisms, there's a weapon upgrade system. Between chapters you get into an immersive menu where you can buy upgrades to your gun, like an extended magazine, reflex sight, the ability to dual wield pistols. A bit strange that you need to buy an upgrade for that, but whatever. The materials you use to upgrade your guns are lying around in the world. There are cyan upgrade materials, then there are yellow upgrade materials, and then there are also pinkish upgrade materials. Some in plain sight, but most are somewhere hidden off the beaten path. I really do think the system makes the game worse, because it makes it so much slower. I just want to whiz from rooftop to rooftop and shoot enemies like a total badass, but I can't. The game won't let me, because I need to look into every nook and cranny for upgrade materials. Well, technically I don't have to. The upgrades are all pretty inconsequential, except the extended magazine maybe, but that's very cheap, so I could just ignore the whole system. Except I can't. My brain is just wired that way. I have to look for and collect these randomly colored bags, even though I know, I'm very well aware that this makes the game less fun for me. Don't get me wrong, looking in every nook and cranny for materials that I can use to make my character stronger is fun. That's a great game mechanic in the right game. This is not the right game. Stride Fates is at its best when it's fast. It's mediocre or worse when it's slow. One redeeming factor is that you can freely replay every chapter whenever you want, so you don't feel too bad about missing these materials. You can just come back later to get them. The game gives you this synopsis of how many you have found in each chapter. I have no desire to go back and look for them, no desire whatsoever. We have to talk a little bit more about pacing mechanisms. There are these little 3D puzzles, or activities rather, you'll have to do, sometimes to progress, sometimes to get extra upgrade materials. There's this one tracing a line thing and a little Tetris type thing. They are not interesting or challenging, they are just there. These are very typical pacing mechanisms, right? Whose only purpose is to slow a game down. I have to ask a question. Why? Why does this game need so many pacing mechanisms? Why slow it down so much? I really don't get it. If the aim was to give the player the chance to catch their breath from time to time, I get that, that's important. But Stride Fate seems to be about 70% pacing mechanism and 30% game. Something is way off there. I haven't even talked about the stealth section yet. boy oh boy, there's a whole stealth chapter and I hated it. I'll leave it at that. Stealth is really not good. It's functional, it works, but that's about it. The game is again very self-aware that something is off here. While you crawl through an air duct, you have to listen to this exchange.
Do you miss parkour?
Don't poison my soul.
Yeah, rub it in. It doesn't help that the stealth chapter is especially janky gameplay-wise and nonsensical premise-wise. Speaking of jank, the main character is part of an elite police force, equipped with special implants that allow him to effortlessly parkour over the rooftops of the city. But he can't climb stairs or walk up a ramp. Again, I'm pretty sure small things like this will get fixed, but in case they won't, here's your heads up. I did play the game on a Quest 2, a Steam version is announced for sometime next year, but for now it's Quest only. The game is very linear, sometimes there's more than one way to get up a building, but that's about it. You can't just decide to take off in a different direction to explore like over there. There are 12 chapters plus an epilogue, netting in a playtime of about 8 hours. There are some sections of the game where you enter the cyberspace to unlock a door or something. These sections are pure parkour and thus good. Funny how in a science fiction game cyberspace looks like this, while in real life cyberspace looks more like this. I like the visuals, considering that the game has to run on the Quest 2, it looks pretty good. You venture through 3 different districts, and while the slums in the Neo district have its own identity, I felt that the Asian district felt a bit tacked on, as if just some Asian looking assets were splotted upon the Neo district. They could have done more to give this part of town its own identity, but it's okay, it's alright. Performance was a bit sketchy, especially breaking glass caused pretty bad frame drops, at least on the Quest 2. On the Quest 3 it's probably fine. There are 2 difficulty settings. The normal mode is called Chaser, then there's an easy mode. I only played on Chaser, the game is not very challenging. I mainly died from falling, the main character is very tanky, he can take a punch, and most enemies die pretty much instantly. Ammo is always plentiful, it's not a difficult game. So, would I recommend Stride Fates? Well, to circle back to the beginning of the video, there are times when Stride Fates is a pure joy to play. It's just so inconsistent. I kind of get where they're coming from though. It is very clear that they did not want the game to be repetitive. They wanted every chapter to feel unique and they succeeded in that. They really did. The problem with that is the vast differences in quality. The fast-paced parkour bits are so good. Combined with basic shooting mechanics, it's even more exhilarating. But take only the basic shooting without the parkour, no longer that good. Stealth sections, worse. Sections where you are forced to use melee weapons, much worse. Melee combat is terrible in this game. What Joyway were trying to do here was just way too ambitious. Keeping it simpler, concentrating on their strengths would have resulted in a better game. I do hope though that this is not the last chapter of the Stride saga. If you would put something like Stride Fates into an open world setting with more fleshed out combat mechanics and minus all the things that slow the game down, and maybe a story that, well, you know how awkward it is to facepalm with a VR headset on? So maybe a story that does not make me want to facepalm all the time, that is a game I would love to play. Anyway, I will probably wait a bit until they get some more of the jankiness fixed and maybe wait for a sale. The quantity is here with the 8-hour campaign, but the production quality might not justify the price tag. But as I said multiple times, I still had fun. That is it for me today. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and tell me, did you enjoy the game? Or if you haven't played it, are you planning on picking it up? See you in the next one.